Alright everyone, it's time to talk about democratic socialism and how it's literally just socialism. This term was not really in flux until fairly recently in the United States and some parts of Europe as well. And there were social democracy movements around Europe. Some of them, they fall well short of actually having anything to do with socialism. Some of them, they're like our Democrats. They're a corporatist movement. They just slap the label socialism on themselves, I guess, to have youth appeal, because they think it'll be cool or something. Oh, yeah, Marx was a pretty splendid guy, but communism goes too far. Here's our one proposal for like solar-powered hippie van mass transportation or something like that. Look at the word though or the term rather that we're thinking of. Look at the term democratic socialism. What does it fucking mean? Socialism within the bounds of a democracy? So you're saying any representative system that adopts socialism is a democratic socialist system? Yeah. Oh, that sounds family friendly now, doesn't it? Now, remember, you've got to be very, very careful around family friendly terms when used in a political context. War on terror, UN peacekeepers, and so forth. Very, very careful, because usually it means the opposite. I can think of a nation that is technically a democracy and also under socialism. It's called Venezuela. You see, the Venezuelans don't use that term, though. They use various other terms. Oh, yeah, we're Chavistas or whatever. Bernie Sanders and people like that don't want you to... when they say that we're socialists, they would also follow that up and say, but I don't want you to compare me to Venezuelan policies. I want to be compared to the Scandinavian countries that actually work, you know, they're first world, and they're also white. That's what he wants you to think. That's what Bernie Sanders wants you to think of. When he says democratic socialism, he wants you to think of Sweden or something. Now, if you're on the right, you probably think of Sweden and you're like, how is that helpful? That's not that much better than Venezuela. Yeah, but he's thinking fiscally, because he doesn't want to scare off the centrists that aren't, you know, they're not like you, they're not to the right. They're just centrists. They're worried mostly about money. They're worried about their wallet, their job, and taxes and stuff. So he wants them to look at Sweden and say, oh, free healthcare, free childcare, free education for all. Free, everything's free. Trademark Bernie Sanders 2016. What a wonderful world it sounds like now, doesn't it? See, the problem is it'll never work, because it's not fucking free. You'd have to amp up the tax rate massively on all brackets. Yeah, that you wouldn't be getting a tax return back if you're poor, most likely. You'd get some other welfare handout that would be peanuts in comparison. You wouldn't be the one deciding what to do with that money. One of the problems of socialism. A problem with socialism that we see when it enters its late stage is exactly what we see in Venezuela. In Venezuela, the government absorbed more and more of people's money, made the switch to socialism, started gobbling up most of people's productivity. It then planned what to do with that. It gave it out in the form of, oh, healthcare, free or subsidized. Maybe some government-run subsidized grocery outlet, you know, stuff that's reduced in cost or free on the backs of the productive class of Venezuela. And for a while, things went fine because they had high productivity. Oil prices were historically through the roof. That was their monocultured sort of productive asset of their economy in the first place. We've got oil. Come buy our oil. Oh, we're making a killing off all of this oil. Huge, huge amounts of money. You can't even fucking fathom it. And so as long as the oil sales went well, everything was fine. When a socialist nation, though, experiences an economic downturn, as it tends to do because it's become socialist, as it moves towards those later stages, you get layer upon layer of bureaucracy and tax increases and handouts. What happens is that country strangulates itself. It's impossible for, within the democratic system of socialism, it is not possible, in many cases, for the nation to actually transfer out of or temper the socialism that it has gotten itself into. Because the lower, and in many cases, the middle class, have become reliant upon the handouts that the government is giving out. So when it can no longer fund those things, it simply goes into debt. It begins to hyperinflate. It has other problems. When we look at Venezuela, the only problem there isn't just the oil price collapse. It goes well beyond that. It's the price of oil collapsed, and they didn't diversify their economy, and they centrally plan everything, and they never made any investments into infrastructure, and other problems associated with this. It's more complex than just, oh, oil prices fell, therefore they've got less money. Yeah, that's the main, it's not even the disease, socialism's the disease. That's the main symptom of their problem, because they never diversified their economy. Because they were too busy being socialists. Now you look at the Scandinavian countries, all the massive wealth that they have built up there is the result of having access, first and foremost, access to mass natural resources as a ratio when combined, when compared to the actual population. The Scandinavian countries are fairly sparsely populated. They got small populations. So it just kind of works. You get a lot of resources, not that many people. Yeah, it's a little bit easier to fund these things. Number two, they are on a downturn. Sweden is on a downturn right now. It is on a downhill path. The fact that it hasn't yet become evident is because, specifically, you look at these countries, they were able to indulge in socialism on the back of capitalist labor for quite some time, because they had so much wealth. Now they're going to begin to run out of money, because as they increase in their socialism, and as they increase in their bleeding heart, let's take everyone who comes here, they will be pissing away more and more and more of their money less and less efficiently on social spending. The people will demand it. Even the working class, people, they're not leeches, they have jobs, they do what they need to do, they will demand it too. If the government ever suggests that we can't pay for both free healthcare and free education and free childcare and subsidized housing and subsidized this, that, and the other thing, if the government ever says, well, you know, we're running into too much debt here, we got to do something about this, we're going to need some limited austerity, people go nuts. They'll call the government far right. The lower and working classes will, which is, you know, a large proportion of the population of most nations. They'll say that they're evil, they're selling them out to corporations, they become controlled opposition. Then you get a bunch of socialists running around burning things, as we see again in Venezuela. But the democratic socialist doesn't want you to compare them to Venezuela. Now, think of this. This is the big kicker. Half a decade ago, when Venezuela was generally doing fine, Salon and other leftist media outlets within the United States and the West at large pointed to Venezuela, where there had been a significant uptick in human development and a significant uptick in the availability of commercial items that weren't really available a few decades before Chavez. In all honesty, they looked at that and they said, aha, this is real socialism. We should export this basic model to the United States. It is ethical, and it is fiscally sound. They pointed to Venezuela openly, most of these people, as the most massive socialist success story that had ever taken place. The second the oil prices dropped and Venezuela went back almost immediately to the Stone Age when it came to human development and infrastructure, they said, oh no, that's no longer real socialism. Scandinavia is real socialism. Let's look at Sweden. We need to take a look at Norway. We need to look at all of these different countries in Northern Europe. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to point to some formerly very deep third world nation with people who were not of European stock completely, had some native blood and stuff. They wanted to point to them and use them as a standard bearer of socialism. They didn't want to have to point to near homogeneous societies as the standard bearer of socialism. The only reason they were even able to do that is because of all the migrants coming in, multiculturalism and diversity. And it doesn't work. Fiscally, socialism will never work. It always strangulates itself. What you call social justice or financial justice or any of these other things is just the next logical step downwards from government interventionism, which is what we already have. A weird hybrid between having a kind of free market and a socialist system. Then you just abandon that. You say, oh, still too much corporate control. It's so evil. You know, there are people who are poor. The poor people never existed under any socialist model. Venezuela, just ignore the existence of that altogether. Then you adopt, you know, complete full socialism. You've taken a step downwards in the death spiral that takes you on towards full chaos. And that's what we see today. So I would warn you, just because somebody manufactures a family-friendly sounding term, democratic socialism, we would never have an autocracy. We'll never have a dictator, an oligarchy, suspend constitutional rights in the name of fiscal expediency to save our necks or anything like that. when they make up these family-friendly terms, and this includes when the right tries to do that, we remember the War on Terror crap of W's days, you should avoid those groups, because they're usually full of shit. That's about all. Peace out.